Welcome to United in Recovery. My name is Brooke, and my story includes lots of stuff, including alcoholism, childhood trauma, codependency, workaholism, breast cancer survivor. But what I know is the redemptive power of Jesus Christ is bigger than all that stuff. And that's not just for me, that's for each and every one of us. Tonight, we conclude a series called Sanity Through Serenity, and we have focused on the Serenity Prayer. Our motivation in this series was our sense that everything around us has felt pretty insane in our society, in our culture, and in our lives. And we felt like focusing on the Serenity Prayer is a way for us to refocus, to quieten the noise outside of us and focus on God's truth. And one of the ways we see that is through the Serenity Prayer. We first started with defining what serenity is, and that's a peace that passes all understanding. And for many of us, chaos has been a part of our lives for as long as we can remember. So serenity is hard for us to even grasp because we've not really experienced it. But we talked about acceptance, accepting. We've talked about courage and wisdom. We've talked about living and enjoying and accepting and taking, trusting and surrendering. Tonight, we focus on happy. Now, be honest, the word happy does not make me happy. It's like a frustrating word for me because I would argue. I shouldn't argue, but one of my perspectives is that we as society have diluted the word love and we've skewed the word happy because we're all supposed to be happy. How are you? I'm good. And we pretend like we're this happy. So what is happy? We are bombarded by these messages in our lives, whether it's through TV commercials or advertisements that come up on social media or whatnot. We are led to believe that all beach parties are where no one ends up drunk in a fight or hungover, that romantic getaways don't include the baggage of our relationship up to that point, and that our spouse is physically and emotionally present. We're led to believe that happy means our kids appear awesome and without any issues and definitely never get addicted to anything. We see images that dance on our TVs and our screens of various ways that are on the verge, if not, are pornographic. And the pictures on Facebook are usually not our first take. They are multiple takes to get the perfect one, to show that we are happy. And yet what we know behind all those images, behind all that perception, is the truth that life is hard. Hardships do happen, but our expectations become skewed by what we think we're supposed to be with happy. So when we hear the Serenity Prayer say that we are going to be maybe reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy in the next, automatically think, what? What is happy? I've referenced that Trevor Hudson has written a book about the Serenity Prayer, and he defines happy in his book when he talks about this section of the Serenity Prayer. He defines it as this, that this deep sense of inner well-being and contentment, the experience of being fully alive to ourselves, to others, and to God. That is the definition of happy that I can get behind. That definition that we will be, and I still think the operative word in this part of the Serenity Prayer is reasonably. You see, I don't know about you, but reasonable isn't necessarily what I'm looking for. I'm looking for just all out happy. The Serenity Prayer says serenity means we're reasonably happy, reasonably content. That we have this sense inside of us that is not dictated by outside circumstances. That says we're okay. We're not perfect, not even circumstances the way we'd choose it. We're frustrated at people at times, yet we're reasonably happy. And the supremely happy, that comes in the life after, when we get to spend the rest of our lives in the presence of God. That's supremely happy. And I think oftentimes we seek supremely happy now, rather than reasonably happy. Or maybe it's just me. In Philippians 4, Paul writes, I am not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. That's Jesus. That our happiness is never going to come purely from external circumstances. They always leave us wanting more, or at least they do for me. They may be an instant gratification, but it's fleeting, and no one ever stays perfect all the time. And so people let me down, and so my happiness, if it's connected to others, it's fleeting. It comes and goes. What Paul reminds us of in Philippians 4 is that we can deal with all things. The insanity of our society, the insanity within our relationships, the insanity driving the car and in traffic, that our strength doesn't come from something that we can create. It comes from God. It comes through Jesus. And I think how we seek that out, because I think at times we think, oh, go be reasonably happy. Go be reasonably happy when it's not that easy. It's going to be a process, and it's going to take some action. Action that we find in the 12 steps of admitting that we are powerless over people, places, and institutions. That the only things we have power over are our second thought and beyond, over the choices that we make and the behaviors that we engage in. But God is all powerful. Step 2, that we get to choose every day who's going to have our thoughts and actions. Is it God? Or is it the insanity and noise outside of us? We get to take inventory. We get to confess. We get to surrender. We get to make amends. We get to take daily inventory. We get to pray and meditate. We get to be of witness to what God is and has done in our life. And we get to be of service to others. That's reasonably happy. That's my understanding of how we get to reasonably happy and get to stay there. Being content in today, not because life's perfect or even close to perfect, but because I can look outside. There's this saying I've heard in recovery for years, and it took years for me to understand it, is wearing life like a loose garment, that it's just kind of looser. I just don't have as much attachment to it. I'm not holding as tight and trying to control. Because God is bigger than all my stuff, bigger than all our stuff. He's bigger than, he has been around for a really, really long time. And that's good news because he's constant and consistent. Our dependence becomes on God and not on us or others. And that's where reasonably happy comes. Accepting the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did the sinful world as it is, not as we would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy, reasonably content, and peaceful inside in this life and supremely happy in the next. That's how we seek sanity through serenity. We encourage you in open share groups or with accountability or sponsor, we ask you to consider, what is your definition of reasonably happy? And is it a healthy definition? Is it a skewed definition? And what part of the steps do we need to look at to live into reasonably happy, being content in all situations? Because our strength comes through Jesus. We want to invite you to be with us in the Mondays in November as we will focus on a story that we find in the New Testament that talks about gratitude. We hope you will be a part of those conversations. We are grateful that you've joined us in whatever form tonight. May you know that you are loved by a mighty God. Let's say the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy in the next. Amen.